So as some of you may know, I recently broke my sanity by watching The Legend of Korra. And before jumping back into crappy movies and TV shows, I decided I earned myself a break. So these next few weeks, I'm going to be reviewing and analyzing the Avatar comics. And I can't really make my epic dubstep intro this time, considering the fact that all I have to work with is images. So before we begin with the actual story, let's have a look at the cover. We got my boy Zuko looking more fresh and moisty than ever. We got Toph, who kind of looks like a creepy doll from Kmart. We got Sokka, who looks like the boomerang guy from Avatar. And we got Katara, who in my opinion has a better design than she did in the actual series. And Aang looks the same. Now starting with the actual comic. Aang and Zuko promise to restore balance to the land, starting with the Earth Kingdom. And the Earth King accidentally throws shade at Zuko's scar. So after that little fiasco, Sokka wants to ride Appa with who I assume is Suki. Also, Toph makes another blind joke. Anyway, with all the fun and games, it is now time to get serious. Zuko tells Aang about his visit with Ozai in prison and how he wants Aang to end him if he shows signs of becoming like his father. Jeez, Zuko, you've only been the Fire Lord for a day and you're already suicidal. So Aang unwillingly obliges with Zuko's request. 1 year later, Zuko is having constant paranoia of somebody trying to assassinate him. Apparently, there had been 5 attempts previously. For some reason, the guards try to tell Zuko to go back to bed. So a person knocks out the idiotic guard and Zuko goes on the offensive. The person trying to take down Zuko believes that he betrayed his own nation. So Zuko fights this mysterious foe for a bit until he gets stripped. My back! Only for him to immediately get back up and firebend the freak out of this person. So Zuko unmasks this person and it turns out that she's the daughter of Mayor Yu Dao. Yu Dao was one of the first Fire Nation colonies. This girl is mad because apparently Aang and Zuko's harmony restoration movement is destroying her home. So this woman goes back to her home in chains while basically saying that she simply went to Zuko about her problems when in reality she tried to freaking assassinate him. Ever heard of a feedback system? If you didn't like what was going on, then you should have talked to the people in charge, not tried to assassinate them. Okay, maybe I could see why she wanted to assassinate Zuko. Then this guy goes as far as to throw shade at Zuko, talking about how his father wouldn't have let himself be bullied into submission. Are you dumb? Ozai was insane. He wasn't anything but a power-hungry tyrant. So Zuko has a flashback of the time he visited his father in prison, which was basically the exact same version of where he asked him where his mother was in the series. But his father doesn't offer any actual advice to Zuko. He only serves to be the terrible father he is. So Zuko flashes back into reality and pins this man against the wall. This freaking man is so delusional! Meanwhile, Aang along with Sokka and Katara make their way to I don't know where, I'm still reading the page. So Aang learns that Zuko actually gave in to this swine! God dang it, Zuko. Meanwhile, at the Beifong Metal Bending Academy, Toph smashes these poor people into the ceiling. And it turns out that there's some trouble downtown, so Toph makes her way onto Appa, nearly scaring Sokka to death. You know, Toph can't actually see Appa in the sky. Imagine she just missed Appa entirely. So Toph learns about Zuko losing the harmony restoration movement and even isolated himself. Aang starts talking with Roku about what he should do about Zuko, and from the looks of it, Aang may have to kill Zuko in order to not repeat the same mistake that Roku made of sparing Sozin. So Aang and the gang make their way to Zuko just to talk to him. And there's this throwaway line of where Aang and Katara call each other sweetie, which is just... why? So Aang goes to the city to talk to Zuko only for the guards to start attacking him. Obviously, he being the way he is just does his typical nope fighting style. So the other guards join the fight and Aang still proceeds on with his go-to fighting style. Aang, please! So Aang's clothes catch fire, but since he's too distracted focusing on himself, Katara has to put it out. Also, I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but it just doesn't sound right for Aang and Katara to call each other sweetie and boyfriend. It just... no. Anyway, another guard tries to take Aang's head off, only for Katara to shoot water crystals at him. Then Mike and Brian remember that Avatar is PG at most, so Zuko steps in to stop her. Also, why are the guards attacking Aang? I know he showed up uninvited, but going as far as to attack the Avatar of all people seems a little bit rash. Even for the Fire Nation. And for some reason, Zuko got this enigma that since he is the Fire Lord, he needs to protect his nation. Aang being prone to this BS just blows him off. Literally. So Aang threatens to kill Zuko, which sends him out of control, and that just does not sound like something Aang would say. Fortunately, Katara is able to calm him down. So Aang and Zuko casually start having a conversation after that whole thing about Yu Dao. Zuko manages to make a system where firebenders and earthbenders could work together to produce metal. But why exactly did Zuko attack Aang when his guards were out of control? So Zuko was originally planning on removing the Dao from the Earth Kingdom, but then he got really sleepy and had too much paint to drink. So what happened with Zuko was that the wife of the swine earthbended her husband and it caught Zuko off guard. So the family showed Zuko their way of life and Zuko finds that the system of the Fire Nation with the Earth Kingdom works better. However, Aang being the Avatar disagrees with this, because the 4 nations are only 4 and all that. Now the problem I see right off the bat is how it resembles the story between Sozin and Roku. Sozin wanted to share his greatness in the Fire Nation with the rest of the world, which did originally sound like a good idea, but he took it way too far. But Roku was stubborn on the idea of the 4 nations only meant to be 4. This ended up causing conflict with Sozin and Roku when Sozin went through with his plan anyway. Roku was forced to take out Sozin, but not really. Now, I just finished watching The Legend of Korra, and from what I could tell from the series, Zuko and Aang were still best friends, so I'm very curious to see how this seemingly impossible situation plays out. Anyway, Katara somewhat agrees with the idea of the Tao working with the Fire Nation, and fair enough, because they are part Earth Nation and part Fire Nation and all. For some reason, nobody actually brings this up to Aang, so he continues to be stubborn on his 4 nations argument. Anyway, some people outside the gate are getting impatient that Aang is taking so long to talk to Zuko, so they throw rocks at Sokka. So Toph has to set these suckers straight. So Aang finally returns with Katara to tell them about the news and how they'll need more time. Meanwhile, Zuko gets a visit from May. I can pronounce her name now. I'm just gonna up and say it right now. Zuko and May as a relationship do not work. Don't get me wrong, they are good together on paper. On paper. But when you actually see these two lovebirds interact, you start to realize that throwing 2 mentally troubled people into a relationship is a pretty hefty recipe for disaster. Let me explain a little further. Zuko's constantly having twists and turns in his decisions and temper. May easily gets irritated at literally everything, which makes the slightest thing that Zuko does an ending relationship sorta bad. Now this isn't to say that May is a bad person, I just don't think she's the right person for Zuko. In conclusion, they have a spark, but not a fire. So May gives Zuko some real good security because his actual guards can only fight. Actually, now that I think about it, I've never seen these guards take out anyone. But despite this, Zuko is still paranoid that somebody's gonna assassinate them. Also, why do Suki's eyes keep changing color? Her eyes are light blue in this picture, and then are saturated by about 10 points in this picture. What the freak is going on? So Zuko takes a walk to freaking Ozai, of all people, and asks for his device. God dang it, Zuko. Part 2. So Aang and Katara continue to be lovebirds while Toph and Sokka remain to be the third wheel. And when Toph proceeds to leave, Sokka decides that he really doesn't want to be left alone with Aang and Katara. So he tags along, and Toph's students fanboy over him. And apparently there's this Fire Nation teacher that kicked out Toph's students in place of his own dojo because apparently Zuko leaving the Harmony Restoration movement is supposed to justify taking over someone else's academy. So Toph and this teacher prepare for a good old smackdown only for Sokka to prevent that from going down. Also, question. Can't Toph just make her own building in a matter of seconds? She's incredibly good at earthbending, and it seems a little weird that she would pick a building rather than build her own, especially considering the fact that she picked a spot that linked between the Earth Kingdoms and the Fire Nation. Anyway, Toph and the teachers settle on having their students go against each other for the ownership of the dojo. But as established 2 seconds ago, Toph's students aren't exactly up to speed on pretty much everything. And these firebending kids are actually pretty good at their element. Meanwhile, Aang and Katara arrive at the Earth Kingdom village, and almost immediately Aang has some fangirls on him. And what is that t-shirt design? Anyway, the fangirls offer Aang a place to stay, and first of all, don't stay at a fangirls clubhouse. It's guaranteed to be the weirdest night of your life, and Katara is literally right there. Meanwhile, Zuko is talking to his father about Ember Island, which I guarantee is a way to play on Zuko's heartstrings. About how Zuko rescued a turtle crab and how his hesitation to make a decision cost him spending the rest of the day vomiting seawater. Meanwhile, Sokka offers to help Toph train her students because he thinks that he can do it for some reason. Anyway, Aang decided to go to the fangirl club anyway, and Katara's getting a little jealous. And Katara decides that she's done hearing all the fangirls talk, and they hightail it out of there. So cutting back to Zuko. Zuko, get your dang sleep! Your scar is starting to have 2 baggy eyes! So he continues to speak to his father about the turtle crab story, only for Zuko to have the same conclusion that he had from the start, that he was on the right side despite feeling differently about it. Meanwhile, God bless the Neothosaurus, Toph attempts to train her students in a similar fashion to Sokka. Speaking of which, he interrupts Toph to tell her about his plan to train her students by getting them emotional. Problem with that fact is the emo dude that I'm 90% sure was the inspiration for Chinese knockoff Mai. But the plan to get him emotional is to call him by his real name, which I'm just dying to find out what it is now. Anyway, Sokka and Toph decide to develop some metal bending armor for Toph's students, but Sokka remains to be unknown to the fact that Toph is blind. So instead he prompts Toph to make the armor by bending over. And then we are shown this random couple for some reason, how this guy's girlfriend has a problem with him protesting. So Aang and Katara arrive to the Earth King's palace and set up a meeting with Zuko. And Sokka and Toph set up a campfire bonding session, and even tells a spooky story in order to rile up the students in order to make them bend. Then Toph shows up with some giant buff winged pig warhog? And then Toph reveals the emo kid's name, Muchi Guchi La Puchi III. Wow. So the emo kid does an anime stance, then Sokka throws coins at them, but they don't metal bend. So back to Aang and Katara. They can't set up a meeting with Zuko because the Earth King just had an emotional enigma that he wasn't man enough. No wonder this comic is 3 parts. So Toph and Sokka have a conversation about what the freak they're gonna do about Toph's students, and she talks about how she felt while she was metal bending in the box. I'm absolutely not going to read it all off, but you can pause the video if you're interested. And then Toph decides to give up on her Earthbending Academy because she only saw it as a way of passing on her pleasure and pain. But right before Toph sits down, her students bust in the room and metal bend her butt off the ground. But instead of letting those people have their wholesome moment, this freaking male Karen just sends his firebending kids after them. Then the metal benders actually start fighting back against the firebending kids with the power of coins. Wait, can't they just earthbend? Although something I find weird is the fact that suddenly all the students figured out how to metal bend. I mean, for one of them, it kind of makes sense, but for the rest of them, they just kind of BS their way into it because they're like, hey, he's doing it, I can do it too now. Then the metal benders bend the male Karen's face. My goodness, is that a mouthful. Meanwhile, Mei finds out that Zuko has been visiting Ozai and she decides to break up with him over it. I knew it! So it turns out that Mei found out because the Kyoshi warriors found out. Also, why are Suki's eyes gray? Also, I'm genuinely surprised the entire Avatar fandom didn't ship Suki and Zuko just because of this one panel. And I could have very well just ignited a fire just now. And Zuko finds out that the Earth King is sending an army after the Fire Nation because he's not manly enough. Part 3. So the Fire Nation and the Earth Nation start to battle with each other. Aang and Zuko are shown next to each other having the parallels of their own advisors telling them not to do it the way that they see it necessary. This line right here describes it very well. This entire page is actually heartbreaking. At the beginning, Zuko suspected that something like this may have happened. Him turning into his father, asking Aang to end him if it came to that. Now Zuko is under the influence of Ozai, and Aang is under the influence of Roku. Both of them have no idea what to do and cannot make a decision for themselves. Instead, they rely on the people that have previously failed their own duty and overall caused a lot of bad for the world. So then, Aang goes into the Avatar state and Zuko sees a reflection of his mother behind Roku. Oh wait, it was a dream. Well, looks like I overanalyzed this entire panel just for it to be a freaking dream parallel. My god, do I feel stupid now. So Aang and Katara warned the people about the Earth Kingdom's army, only for them to send fire and rocks their way. They also send meteor hammers and throwing axes. So Aang breaks into the place the axe throwing man was hiding, only to be met with a bunch more axes. Also, it turns out that this random guy from earlier was the one throwing axes at Aang. So it turns out that this guy had fallen in love with a Fire Nation girl after splitting off with the Freedom Fighters, and I don't know why this is important. So Aang finally manages to tell them that an entire army is after them. Also, Aang needs more fangirls. Wait a minute, there's a freaking army being sent after them. Why are they lollygagging? Then Aang gets angry at the fangirls for treating the Air Nomad outfits like costumes. And yes, these fangirls are being garbage bins to the Air Nation, but my god, there's an army coming! There's better things to be dealing with right now! Okay, but seriously, Aang goes to the army to sell them off. Meanwhile, Zuko is contemplating to himself about what he should do before he realizes that his actions are the same as his father's, only for different reasons, and he wishes that he could ask for his uncle's help. Aang even has an emotional enigma about why the nations must be separate, and even go as far as to joke about the weaker nation, which is why he will seek out the movement to the end, even if he has to kill Zuko. Which also goes against the Air Nomads. Genuine question though. Why would Aang need to kill Zuko? He has energy bending and could take away Zuko's bending if deemed necessary. He doesn't need to kill Zuko at all, even if Zuko made him promise that. Anyway, Suki goes to pick up Sokka after he complained about getting the Oogis from Aang and Katara, only to give Toph some of those himself. Anyway, the firebending teacher of those brats from the previous part reported Sokka and Toph for some reason, but Suki's just there to take Sokka and Toph for a ride to show them that Zuko is gonna fight against the Earth Nation. So right before Katara is about to tell Aang a crucial piece of info about the Dai family, they get interrupted by the protesters, who have absolutely no patience for anything, so they just attack. But Aang manages to guard the gate from the protesters and even manages to face one of the rocks head on. But turns out the Smeller Bee was just distracting Aang so that they could drill through the wall. Meanwhile, Sokka, Toph, and Suki prepare to stop Zuko from getting to the Earth Nation. And the first step they take is jumping into a super dark hole slide that Toph made. And Suki makes the same blind joke that Sokka made while in the dark hole. So Toph starts ripping into one of the Fire Nation tanks and yeets one of the soldiers off their seats. Unfortunately, Sokka didn't think his plan through like in the boiling rock. So they decide their new plan is to unscrew the bolts to the tanks. Meanwhile, the protesters manage to break into the city and they found Sneer. And as Aang desperately tries to prevent the fight, Longshot pats Smellerbee on the shoulder and told him who knows what to calm him down. But there's still some meatheads in the crowd that just want to throw rocks and it ends up starting an all-out war. And just as Aang gets control again, the Earth King shows up. My goodness, everything's going wrong. Then Aang's fangirls show up again, but this time they're wearing headbands and offer to help Aang. But how? So now Aang must decide whether to defend Yudao or continue with his movement. And just as things are about to break out, Sokka and Toph show up. As Aang prepares for an all-out war with Zuko, Katara and Toph banter to each other about who did their job better. But then Toph absolutely destroys all the Fire Nation tanks, making her the winner. Then Zuko sends the Fire Nation after the Earth Kingdom soldiers in order to defend themselves. Then Aang temporarily confronts Zuko, only for Katara to basically whip him out of the Avatar state. So Katara tells Aang to find a quiet place in order to figure out the decision he needs to make. But Aang cannot make a decision because he wants to preserve his air nomad philosophy, or else it will be lost forever. Then Roku reveals to Aang that Zuko is related to him, but must also fulfill his promise if he wishes to end this conflict. Meanwhile, Team Avatar is working on not letting the army kill themselves, and Toph makes Sokka go on another suicide slide. Then Toph's students show up to help with the fight. Then Katara confronts the king, and it turns out that he's regretting his decisions to send his army against an entire freaking nation because he thought he wasn't manly enough. So Katara takes the king down to where the Fire Nation people were living in the Earth Kingdom to show them their way of life. Meanwhile, Zuko joins the fight to defend his people, while the Earth Kingdom is defending their land. And just as they start to clash, Aang emerges from the rocks well in the Avatar state. Zuko tries to convince Aang that this is not what he thinks it is, only for him to once again come to the realization that he's doing exactly what his father would do. And he falls into a hole. And just as everything seems to be coming to an end, Aang saves Zuko. Then Aang shows the king who he has been fighting this whole time. Every known nation, because he wasn't manly enough. And then Zuko, while overhearing this entire thing, realizes that he was right all along. And being the mess of confusion that he is right now, he falls into the ground in a similar fashion to how he made a single good decision in The Last Airbender. Then Aang comes to the realization that he's not like Roku. Aang tells Roku that even despite making decisive decisions, there will always be risk. Aang finally comes to the realization that the wisdom of the old will not help him anymore, and that he has to only rely on himself. Then Iroh comes out to tell Aang that Zuko is finally awake. They share their dreams that just happen to be parallel to each other, and the fact that Aang had to end Zuko. Then Zuko tells Aang about his mother being in his dream, and Iroh thinks that it's a possibility of being a reality, or being the result of not having slept, having to rule over a whole nation, and eating spicy food before going to bed. So Zuko tells Iroh and Aang that he sent out a search for his mother only to come out empty-handed. And Iroh makes meatball tea. Bro, we need a separate comic just for Iroh, I swear. And then Aang teaches the fangirls how to be actual air nomads. Holy crap, I just realized that's why there's non-bending air nomads in The Legend of Korra. Then Zuko talks to the one person who he believes can get the info about his mother out of Ozai, Azula. And the comic ends with her agreeing to help Zuko find her. So in conclusion, this comic is pretty dang incredible. Everything from Zuko and Aang's parallel to how they resolved it, it just hit the story beats perfectly. Now, it also comes with its flaws or just things that I personally didn't like about it. One of those being the fact that Aang and Katara called each other sweetie. In Avatar, Aang and Katara had a great bond and trust for each other. This trust is displayed by how they worked together in battle, the Love Cave episode or Secret Tunnel episode, and multiple life-threatening moments where they could rely on each other. At first, I didn't really know why Aang and Katara calling each other sweetie bothered me so much. At first, I just thought it was just me cringing, but when I think about it now, I realize the reason it bothered me so much was because Aang and Katara's relationship was built upon their friendship. Aang doesn't see Katara as his girlfriend, he sees her as Katara, and the same is true for her. Making them call each other sweetie, especially in battle, is ignoring their previous friendship. In my opinion, at most, Aang and Katara would simply say, I love you to each other. Anyway, now that I'm done with that nitpick, here's the main problem I had with the comic. The Earth King. Or more specifically, the Earth King's decision to send his army after the Fire Nation colonies because he wanted to seem more powerful and direct. At first, the story dynamic was just a funny joke I made until I realized the Earth King didn't even make the call himself. He did it through another person, which is something I find a little bit stupid when you consider the entire situation with Longfang. How he had corrupted Dai Li and kept Ba Sing Se under his control while the Earth King was just a public figurehead. Considering this, his decision to seem more powerful and direct while passing the responsibility onto someone else is pretty pathetic to say the least. Because the Earth King was insecure about not being manly, but chickens out at the last second and leaves everyone else to clean up his mess. I would consider this character development not a total waste of time if the king decided to pass the role onto someone else who is more capable of it, but as far as I could see, he didn't do that. Now, that is all my complaints about the comic. Like I said before, I really like this comic and I rate it an 8 out of 10. It has been very refreshing to have read this comic after having watched Legend of Korra, and I'm looking forward to reviewing the next one. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you all real soon. Take care.